So my name is Scott Brown. I'm with Anthony Law. I'm corporate and intellectual property attorney, and I focus my practice on creative-based businesses. I want to thank Chase and Sean and everybody at Electric Eye for having me. This is a pretty cool event. So my presentation today is about intellectual property, both not infringing other people's property, and the flip side of that, once you create content that is good and matters to you, how to protect it to keep other people from ripping you off. So I think this matters to everybody here because you're all here because you have a Shopify store, you might have another e-commerce store, you're thinking about doing it, or you have another business, but all of you have a vision about what you want to create. And it's important that you develop that vision, not use other people's vision too much, develop your own voice, and make it what you want. And then once you do that, if you're successful, people are going to want to copy you. So then it's important to make sure to protect what you've done so that other people can't just take what you've done easily without you being able to stop them. So that brings in the concept of intellectual property. So intellectual property is the legal means of protecting what you create. For you guys, this is most important to the expression of ideas you have and all of your branding. And importantly, everything you create is going to be influenced by everything that you've experienced and the things you like. You're going to take all the things you've seen, the things you're a fan of, and you're going to synthesize it into the content you create. And that's how we come up with new things. The tricky part about this is if what you create isn't original enough, you could infringe on someone else. And then once you do create something good, somebody else might want to infringe on you. And at that point, you're going to want to stop them. So that's what this presentation is going to be about, the two sides of that same coin. So intellectual property is everywhere. It covers the walls of every public space. It's all over the place. In here, it's on the Mikey's Late Night Slice name and logo. It's on the Shopify logo. It's all the written content in my presentation is theoretically copyright protected. The logo on your shirt is protected, on your shoes. Everything in your phone has intellectual property protection. And even just talking about the things in your phone would take hours, and maybe even days to talk about every single thing that's protected. So this is a Shopify website, Penny Arcade, and this is just a screenshot of the very top of the website. And I wanted to show this so that you could see how much intellectual property is here. So first you've got just the Mario name is protected. You've got the images of Mario are protected separately. The photograph of this has its own protection. You have Thornwatch, whatever that is protected. These images are protected. This apron might even be protected. And there's other things on here that you might not even notice and can't see that are protected. The Shopify service is protected software. You pay a license to use that. The theme has its own protection. You pay a license to use that. Then there's other things like all your photography, and then even the content of your vendors, the PayPal logo. All these things have protection, and you have to be careful how you use them so that you don't get in trouble with anyone. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple types of intellectual property. There's a few I'm not going to cover because I don't think they're relevant to this audience. Patents, which is inventions and processes. The big ones that we should talk about are trademark and copyright. So trademark, you know it when you see it. It's these famous logos, names, logos, and the concept is that it protects source identifiers. So anything that brings to mind your product in the eyes of your consumer, it can be a trademark. Most often, it's names and logos, product names. It can also be some other things like colors and sounds, like the NBC 3-note chime is a federally registered trademark. The Nationwide jingle. Smells are even starting to be registered. It's hard to do, but Play-Doh recently got a trademark for the smell of its, whatever the generic word for Play-Doh is. Kid Play-Doh, I don't know. But those are pretty hard to get, so I wouldn't think too much about trying to trademark anything like that right now. Okay, so the second one I want to talk about is copyright. Copyright is a little bit wilder and weirder than trademark, and it protects expression of ideas. The big thing you want to think about would be like music, movies, art, photographs. It even protects things like software code and architectural design. Basically anything that makes life great in media and art is protected by copyright. For Shopify sites, it would most importantly be all the photographs, all of your written content, the theme, any of the graphics you use, etc. And the important thing to note about copyright is it protects the expression, not the idea. So what that means is anybody can make a movie about people and aliens fighting in space. Anybody can go and do that. It's not protectable. But you can't go and make Star Wars. That's the protectable expression, okay? So, and then the other tricky thing about copyright is that there can be layers of copyright. So I'm gonna use Star Wars as an example for a lot of things in this presentation. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, so if I say something wrong or refer to a character wrong, I'm sorry, please don't come up to me and talk to me about it. So this poster right here, this is from the first Star Wars movie. This has levels of copyright in it. There's copyright protection over the entire thing. There's protection over just the painting. There's protection over the original photographs the painting is based on. And there's protection in the movie itself. So just this poster, if you were to use this and infringe on Star Wars, you're infringing multiple different things, which is why you need to be careful with copyright and this type of work. So I threw a bonus in here, the right of publicity. This is not an intellectual property. This is actually from the right of privacy. But the idea is that no one can use your name, image, or likeness for a commercial purpose without your permission. So this applies to celebrities and everybody in this room. You can't take a picture of somebody and just throw them in an ad all over the world. That would be infringing their right. Same goes for celebrities. I use this picture of Kevin Durant, who's everybody's favorite basketball player, because to illustrate the difference in how much money he makes. I have the exact numbers here. $27 million in 2017 for his basketball salary. But he made $36 million in endorsements, which if you think about it a certain way, his name and his image now is actually worth more than his basketball ability. LeBron's difference was even bigger. He made $31 million on the court last year and $55 million off the court. So be careful using people, definitely celebrities. So now I'm gonna go a little heavy on Star Wars again. So Star Wars is really well known for being highly influenced by a ton of other things. It basically took all these wonderful elements from other movies and content and mixed it all together into one movie. There's actually a really great web series about this called Remix Everything, and they go by shot almost to show you what it's influenced by. So just a few examples. The C-3PO robot was inspired by the movie Metropolis. The Kurosawa film, The Hidden Fortress, actually featured two bumbling sidekicks who basically are exactly like R2-D2 and C-3PO. Is that R2-D2? Yes. And the lightsaber fights are actually based on Kurosawa films, the sword fights in those. The music is heavily based on Wagner's Ring Cycle opera. A couple of the elements are from the Flash Gordon movies of the 30s and 40s. The iconic, the text flowing across the screen is straight out of a Flash Gordon movie. And the plot of the first Star Wars movie is pretty much identical to a Flash Gordon movie plot. So what's interesting about this is it took all these things, made something new, and then Star Wars, which is owned by LucasFilm and Disney, is actually one of the most aggressive policers of infringement. So here are just a few examples of times that LucasFilm or Disney now owns it, has gone after people for doing something related to Star Wars. Some of my favorites are going after the federal government for using Star Wars for a space initiative. They went after the guy that actually designed the original Stormtrooper helmet. They made Verizon pay a license fee to use the word droid for their phones. And I think probably the most egregious is this guy crowdsourced money to build a life-size AT-AT walker, AT-AT walker, either one. And they sent him a letter to stop that. He wasn't trying to sell it, he wasn't doing anything commercial, but there was money involved, so they sent him a letter. And since we're in Columbus, another good one to note is Ohio State. Ohio State sent over 100 cease and desist letters in the last 2 years to different merchandise sellers that were selling unauthorized goods. And they're not ashamed about it. They actually published these. I think if you go on the NBC4, if you Google it, NBC4 published all of the letters last year, and you can just see all of them, what they say, what the claims are. And I think the point is, Ohio State isn't messing around. Like, they don't want you to infringe on their stuff, so they're highly aggressive about it. So if you've got a site and you're using materials, you might think about whether you're infringing anybody else. So just think about it. Is the content you have or that you're putting out there, is it using something that somebody else might own? And do you think that content, do you think they care a great deal about it? Star Wars, Ohio State, Disney, those big companies, they care. And they're gonna send you a letter, and they might even try to get money out of you. So you want to avoid using other people's content, especially if they're pretty aggressive. And then also you might consider, if you owned that property, would you be bothered by the use? Kind of put yourself in their shoes to see if you think you might be going too far with something. So there's some ways to kind of toe the line, and this is not legal advice, but there are times where you can do things that suggest other people's property without infringing it and get away with selling it. Some good rules of thumb on this might be, don't use people's trademarks, names and logos. That's the easiest one to see. That's the easiest one to make a claim about. You can also use concepts that aren't protectable or are harder to protect. And also, don't use people's names or likeness without their permission. So I got two examples here that I think are good examples of t-shirt companies. And t-shirt companies do this a lot. This is kind of their forte of kind of towing the line into something that these may be licensed or authorized, but I don't think they are. I think these are they just didn't show enough for it to be infringement. So the top one is this is actually an homage shirt, and you know what team this is, but it doesn't say the team name, it doesn't have a logo, it just says the city, which isn't protectable, and it has the colors, which may or may not be protectable. So this is a good way to kind of suggest it, but not totally be obvious. This one is a Star Wars reference. Tatooine is a planet, but nothing else about this is too suggestive of Star Wars. It just has a totally different vibe to it. This is actually from Snorgtees, who kind of makes their entire business on doing this. If you visit their website, everything they make is suggestive of something, but not too much, and that's how they get away with it. I don't think they have any licenses. They just do a good job of kind of suggesting it. I would recommend coming up with your own thing, but there's ways to kind of toe the line at times. So another topic that I think is important is photography. A lot of people think, I hope everyone in here doesn't think this, but a lot of people think if you just grab a photo off the internet, you can use it, and nothing's going to happen. Every photograph automatically is protected by copyright as soon as you take the photo. And people put photos on the internet and claim that they're not protected, but you can't trust that either. And what's worse is there are stock photo companies like Getty and iStock that will actually they use web crawling technology to search for uses of their photos. And then when they find it, they send the owner of the website a cease and desist letter demanding you stop, and a lot of times asking for something like $2,000 to $5,000 to forgive the infringement. This happens so much, there are whole message boards devoted to people figuring out how to do this, or how to deal with it, when to pay, when to try to fight it. So my recommendation would be to not use those. And anyway, if you're making good content, you're developing a store, you probably want to do your own photographs anyway, for the most part. So you can hire photographers to do that. I highly recommend getting a professional photographer. But it's important to note, if they're not your employee, if they're an independent contractor, you just hire someone to take the photos, the default rule is that they own the photo and you just have a license to use it. So that may not be good enough for you. You may need to actually own the photo, and in that case, you need a written agreement saying they're assigning the photo to you. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a page. It can be a couple paragraphs. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. But if you want to own the photo and they're not your employee, they need to assign it to you. So now we've talked about how to not infringe other people, so I want to switch to how you can protect your content. So we're just going to talk about a couple things here. I think the most important here, and the one that is easily applicable to everybody right away, is trademark registration. So federal trademark registration gives you a lot of rights, and this is for your name and logo. Gives you the right to use the R circle symbol. You can't use that until you have a registered trademark. You can use the TM symbol anytime you like on anything. Gives you the right to file a trademark infringement lawsuit. It'll actually stop other people. If other people try to file for a trademark with the USPTO and it's too similar to yours, your mark will stop it. And if you want to expand internationally, it can serve as the basis for an international trademark. So a few notes on this. The filing cost is not very high. It's actually, depending on how you do it, it can be under $300. But if you don't do it and you end up with somebody else with a similar name, it could cost you a lot more money down the line. And another part of filing is figuring out if there is someone else doing something similar. I recommend doing it early, but you don't need to do it until you've got a name or logo that you plan to use for a while. If you're going to use it for a significant amount of time or you're going to put a lot of money behind it, that's when you want to consider protection. You can get state registration, but I don't recommend it. It doesn't get you much. It only covers the state, and it doesn't really cost much, or cost less than federal. So always try to get federal. It covers the entire United States. It's much stronger. And also, it is possible to do it yourself. Everybody in here knows how to do things. I'm sure all of you could figure it out, but coming in cold on it, it'd probably take you 8 to 10 hours to figure out how to do it. And nothing with trademarks is complicated. There's just a million little things. So I've seen some people file trademarks on their own, and it gets rejected, and then you're out the filing fee and the time. Or I've even seen people file and get them accepted, but they did it wrong. Say they filed, I know somebody that has a sports app, like a sports talk app, and he filed his trademark for t-shirts. So he's got this trademark for t-shirts, but it really doesn't protect what he does. So it's basically worthless. So it could be a good idea to get some assistance here, considering how important your trademark can ultimately be. And then a couple other things that are outside intellectual property that I think is just relevant to everybody here. After trademark registration, it can be a good idea to get formal written agreements with your vendors. I think a good rule of thumb is if if a deal is worth $1,000 or more, you might want to start thinking about having a written agreement. If you have a gut feeling, if you're nervous about a deal, it might be a good idea to get a written agreement. Or just if there's a lot of terms and you're going back and forth, probably want to get them written down properly. And lastly, it's important to know when to consult an expert. All of you guys, probably have something special about what you do that you would hope people will come to you for. And also, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time with accounting, legal issues, insurance. So, and this is not just legal, but it's really important to get a good accountant and to find an insurance agent that understands your business, that can sell you the policy. This stuff is not fun. It's boring. You don't, let somebody else handle it if you don't have the time or energy for it. So just a few takeaways from this. I think everybody should continue to develop your own IP. Your vision is the best vision for you. And then consider whether anything you're doing could be considered infringing and decide if there's anything you can do about it. And lastly, get the ball rolling on making sure you're protected. There's a lot of resources out there. You can do a lot of things on your own. And just make sure if you don't want anybody to rip something off, that you start to take the steps necessary to protect it. And that's everything for me. Thank you.